I planted 37 varieties of vegetables last year, and 11 of them you can't find in any seed catalog at your local big box store. Not one. My Amish neighbor Daniel just smiled when I told him that because his family has been growing those same 11 varieties for over 150 years. Today, I want to walk you through 15 forgotten vegetables that big agriculture quietly pushed off our plates over the last century. Vegetables the Amish never stopped growing because they never bought into the idea that newer always means better. We're talking about roots that taste like oysters, greens richer than spinach, and tubers that fed entire communities through hard winters when nothing else would grow. I'm going to save the most surprising one for the end, the vegetable that genuinely changed how I think about feeding a family from a backyard garden. It's the one Daniel grows in the back corner of his plot, and once I understood why, I couldn't believe I'd gone 30 years without it. There's also one bonus technique I learned from Daniel's grandmother about preserving these old varieties through the winter, and I'll share that after the list. Here's what I learned from years of sitting on Daniel's porch and trading seeds with him. The Amish didn't reject modern vegetables out of stubbornness. They kept the old ones because the old ones worked. They produced food in poor soil, stored without refrigeration, resisted pests without chemicals, and tasted like something. When commercial agriculture chased shelf life and shipping durability in the 1950s and 60s, dozens of perfectly good vegetables got abandoned because they bruised easy or ripened unevenly. The Amish kept right on planting them. It's not about fighting nature. It's about working with what already works. So let me start with the one most people have never even heard of, skirret, spelled S-K-I-R-R-E-T. This is a sweet white root that was the most popular root vegetable in Europe for over 1,000 years before the potato pushed it aside. Daniel grows a row of it every year, harvests it in late October after the first frost sweetens the roots, and his wife uses it the way most folks use carrots. The flavor is somewhere between a parsnip and a sweet potato with a pleasant nutty finish. You plant the crowns in early spring, 18 inches apart, in deep loose soil, and you basically ignore the plant until fall. It tolerates partial shade, which makes it useful for those awkward spots along the north side of a fence. The first time I ate skirret out of my own garden, I understood why our great-grandparents thought we'd lost our minds switching to grocery store carrots. Now that pairs naturally with the next one because it's another root the Amish kept growing while everyone else forgot. Salsify, sometimes called the oyster plant. When you cook the long tapered roots, they genuinely taste like a mild oyster stew. Daniel's mother made an oyster plant chowder every November with nothing but salsify, butter, milk, and a pinch of salt, and I'd eat it every day if I could. You sow the seed direct in spring, 1/4 inch deep, and let it grow all summer. Harvest after frost, store the roots in damp sand in a root cellar, and you've got fresh oyster flavor all winter. No coastline required. Here's one I discovered by accident when Daniel handed me a black gnarly looking root and told me to take it home and try it. Scorzonera, pronounced scorzonera. It's salsify's cousin, sometimes called black salsify, but the flavor's richer, almost like a cross between asparagus and artichoke. The black skin scrapes off easy after boiling. What I love about scorzonera is that it's a true perennial in zones 4 through 9. Plant it once, let a few roots overwinter, and it comes back every year. The Amish in Lancaster County have plots of it that have been producing continuously since before the Civil War. Good King Henry. This one has the best name on the list and one of the longest histories. It's a perennial spinach substitute that medieval European peasants relied on for centuries, and the Pennsylvania Amish brought it across the Atlantic and never let it go. The young shoots in spring taste like a milder asparagus. The leaves, picked through summer, eat just like spinach, but don't bolt in heat. Plant it in a permanent bed with rich soil. Give it 3 feet of space per plant, and that single planting will feed you for 15 to 20 years. I planted mine in 2017, and I'm still eating off it. Speaking of perennial greens, here's another one most American gardeners have never tasted, sea kale. Daniel's family has been growing sea kale since his great-grandfather planted it in 1890-something. The blanched spring shoots taste like a buttery cross between asparagus and broccoli. You cover the crowns in March with an upturned bucket or a clay pot to block sunlight, and 10 days later, you harvest pale, tender stalks that sell for $20-some a pound at fancy markets. In your own garden, they cost you nothing. The plants live 40 years if you keep them happy. Mulch, heavy in fall, divide every 5 years, and that's about it. Before we go further, let me pause for a second. If what you're hearing makes sense to you, the kind of grounded approach that actually works in a real backyard, then you'll want to look at the resource I put together called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol over at backyardbillbooks.com. It's everything Daniel taught me about keeping a garden productive without chemicals, the 5 defense layers, the 4 bed rotation, and the morning walk concept that takes about 10 minutes a day and saved my tomato crop 3 years running. There's a QR code on screen and a link in the description. Scan whichever's easier. All right, let's keep going. Cardoon. If you've ever grown an artichoke, cardoon is the same family, but you eat the celery-like stalks instead of the flower buds. The Amish blanch the stalks by wrapping them in burlap for about 3 weeks before harvest, which removes the bitterness. The flavor lands somewhere between artichoke heart and celery, and it holds up beautifully in stews. One plant fills a 4-foot circle, so give it room. Direct sow after the last frost, harvest in October. Now here's one almost everyone has growing as a weed and doesn't know it. Lamb's quarters, also called wild spinach. The Amish never weeded it out of their gardens. They harvested it. The young leaves contain more iron than spinach, more calcium than milk, and more vitamin A than carrots. You don't even plant it. You just stop pulling it when it volunteers, then pick the top 6 inches when the plants reach a foot tall. Steam them, saute them in butter, treat them like spinach. I went 30 years yanking this plant before Daniel showed me what I was throwing away. That same principle applies to the next one, Ora, sometimes called mountain spinach. Daniel grows the red variety for color and the green for bulk. It thrives in the heat of July when regular spinach has long since bolted, which makes it the missing piece in most American summer gardens. Direct sow in early spring, thin to 12 inches apart, and you'll be picking leaves from June through September. The red variety adds beautiful color to salads and holds its color when lightly cooked. Sunchokes. Some folks know these as Jerusalem artichokes, though they have nothing to do with Jerusalem or artichokes. They're a North American sunflower that produces knobby tubers underground. The Amish plant a permanent patch behind the barn, harvest from October all the way through March whenever the ground isn't frozen, and never replant because a few overlooked tubers always come back. The flavor is sweet and nutty, somewhere between water chestnut and potato. Now, I want to be straight with you. The first time you eat sunchokes, eat a small portion. They contain inulin, which can cause some digestive theatrics until your gut adjusts. Daniel's grandmother always pickled them in vinegar, which breaks down the inulin and solves that problem entirely. Egyptian walking onions. These are the prankster of the onion family. The plant grows tall, develops little bulbs at the top of its stalk, and when those bulbs get heavy enough, the whole stalk falls over and replants itself a foot or 2 away, hence the walking. The Amish have patches of these onions that have been moving across garden beds for generations. You get green onion tops in spring, small bulbs at the top in summer, and pickling onions from underground in fall. 3 crops from one plant year after year with absolutely zero replanting. Lovage. This is one of those plants you grow once and wonder why every gardener doesn't. Lovage tastes like the most intense celery you've ever had. One plant produces enough flavoring for a family of 4 for the entire year. The hollow stems can be used as straws for tomato juice, which is a small thing that absolutely delighted me the first time Daniel showed me. It's a perennial in zones 3 through 9, grows 6 feet tall, and basically never dies. Planted in a back corner where it won't shade anything else. Now we get into the surprising ones. Ground cherries, also called husk cherries. The Amish have been growing these since the 1700s. Each small fruit comes wrapped in a papery husk like a tomatillo, and when the husk turns brown and the fruit drops to the ground on its own, it's ready. The flavor is something like a pineapple crossed with a cherry tomato, sweet and tropical. They self-seed reliably, so once you plant them, you'll have ground cherries forever. Daniel's wife makes a ground cherry pie that I've thought about probably once a week for the last decade. Garden huckleberries. Different plant entirely from wild huckleberries, but worth knowing. The fruit is bland raw, but cooked with sugar and a splash of lemon, it makes a jam that's nearly indistinguishable from real blueberry jam. The Amish grow these on plots where blueberries won't thrive because the soil is too sweet. One plant produces several pounds of fruit. Direct sow seedlings after frost, treat them like tomato plants and pick when the berries are dull black, never glossy, because glossy means underripe. Cushaw squash. This is a winter squash that doesn't get the powdery mildew or vine borer problems that wreck butternut and acorn crops. The flesh is sweeter than pumpkin, drier than butter, butternut and stores in a cool basement until April. Daniel grows the green striped cushaw, which his great-grandfather brought up from Tennessee. Plant the seeds 2 weeks after last frost, give them 20 feet of vine room, and harvest when the stems turn corky. That brings us to the last one, the one I told you about at the beginning, ground nut, also called hopness or Apios americana. This is a perennial vine native to North America that produces strings of protein-rich tubers underground. Each tuber contains around 17% protein, 3 times what you find in a potato. The Pilgrims survived their first winter eating groundnut from indigenous people who'd cultivated it for thousands of years, and then somehow we forgot. Daniel's grandfather saved a strain that produces tubers the size of a chicken egg, and Daniel grows it on a trellis in the back corner of his plot. Here's why this changed how I think about gardening. A single groundnut vine in one season on a 6-foot trellis will produce up to 2 pounds of tubers. The vine fixes nitrogen in the soil, so it actually improves the ground while it grows. It tolerates partial shade. It's hardy from zone 3 to 7. It doesn't get attacked by deer or rabbits. The tubers store all winter in damp sand, just like potatoes, and the flavor is a cross between a chestnut and a baked potato with a buttery finish. You plant tubers in spring, 2 inches deep, and the second year you start harvesting. After that, it produces every year forever because you always leave a few tubers in the ground. I've grown potatoes for 30 years. Last fall, I dug up my first real groundnut harvest, 6 pounds of tubers from 3 plants in a corner of the garden where nothing else would grow well, and I sat there on the dirt thinking about how an entire continent of indigenous people fed themselves on this plant for thousands of years, and we replaced it with something that requires fungicides, hilling, and rotation. Sometimes the old ways aren't old, they're just the ways that worked. Before I share the bonus, let me cover the 4 mistakes I made for years that these old vegetables corrected. The first one is buying seeds from the same 5 companies that everybody else buys from. I did that for 2 decades. Those companies sell what sells, which means the 700 or so heritage vegetables our great-grandparents grew get quietly dropped from the catalog. Daniel taught me to look at small heritage seed savers and Amish mail-order houses, and that's where the real diversity lives. The second mistake is treating the garden like an annual project. Most modern gardening is start over every spring. The Amish approach is layered. Perennials in the back, biennials in the middle, annuals up front. Once you plant skirret and sea kale and lovage, they keep producing while you sleep. It changed my workload completely. The third mistake is chasing yield over flavor and nutrition. A bushel of supermarket tomatoes has less nutrition than a quart of properly grown heritage tomatoes. We've been measuring the wrong thing for 60 years. The fourth one is pulling weeds I should have been eating. Lamb's quarters, purslane, dandelion greens, all 3 feed you better than half the things you bought seeds for. Daniel calls these the volunteers, and he treats them like welcome guests. Now, the bonus tip I promised. This one came from Daniel's grandmother, who is in her late 90s and still gardens. She taught me how to overwinter root vegetables without a root cellar, using nothing but a galvanized trash can and clean straw. You dig a hole in a well-drained corner of the garden, deep enough to set the trash can in with about 6 inches sticking up. Drill a few drainage holes in the bottom. Layer your roots, parsnips, carrots, salsify, scorzonera, skirret with clean straw between each layer, never letting the roots touch each other. Lid on top, weighted with a brick. Cover the whole exposed lid with a foot of straw and an old burlap sack. The roots stay at right around 38 degrees Fahrenheit through winter, sweeter than the day you put them in there, and you pull them out as needed. I've used this system for 6 years. It works in zones 4 through 7, and it costs about $30 to set up. If you found these old varieties interesting, the deeper system is what I put together in the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol over at backyardbuildbooks.com. Inside, I walk you through the 5 defense layers Daniel uses to keep his garden chemical-free. The 4-bed rotation that prevents the soil exhaustion most of us cause without realizing it, the morning walk routine that catches problems before they spread, and the seed-saving method his family has used for generations. There's a QR code on screen and a link in the description. It's the same approach that turned my garden around after 20 years of fighting it the wrong way. So that's 15 forgotten vegetables the Amish still grow, the ones big agriculture quietly walked away from. Tell me in the comments which one you're going to try first, because I'd love to know. And if you've got an old variety in your family that I didn't mention, share it. That's how we keep them alive. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.